A very warm welcome, Raymond. And thank you so much for taking out your time for this campaign of Goodera and coming on for the interview discussion. And we eagerly wanted to connect with you, with your organization, try to understand what impact are you creating, what work exactly you are doing, and learn more about this particular issue that we are talking about here on World Cancer Day. So the very first question, and I would say the most basic question I'd like to start with is, why is the awareness about this disease called cancer is so important? Because we have seen cancer around us for a long time now. And there have been medical practitioners and medical institutions that have researched a lot about cancer. And it is something that people should already know about a lot, but still it has been created a taboo topic in our society, mainly in the developing nations. And moreover, people have a lot of misconceptions associated with it as well. So I would like to understand from you as well that why is it important? Why is the cancer awareness so critical in today's time?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure and an honor to join you today. And raising awareness regarding cancer research is extraordinarily important, but in a particular way and very significant to our mission and purpose is pediatric cancer. And so anywhere in the world, every 3 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer. And this is a statistic that many people may not be familiar with. In the United States alone, each day, 46 children are diagnosed with cancer, which is, to give a visual, about 2 classrooms full of children. And each day, 7 children die of cancer just in the United States. This is a statistic that we don't see on the nightly news and we don't hear much about. And yet each day, unfortunately, that situation repeats itself. And so the ability to create greater awareness of childhood cancer in particular is something very central and very important for us and for the rest of the world. In our case, Live Like Bella was founded in memory of my daughter Bella, who passed away after a 6-year battle with pediatric cancer. Her story is not that much different than many of the viewers that may be watching this particular program now. When Bella was 4 years old, she was seemingly healthy. Other than some developmental and speech delays, she was physically fine. Until one morning to the next, she became suddenly paralyzed from the waist down, with no symptoms, no history, no evident cause as to why this happened. And the root cause of it was a massive tumor wrapped around her spine and cancer in 9 other parts of her body. And so at only 4 years of age, without her ever polluting herself, smoking, drinking alcohol, or participating in any of the lifestyle habits that we as adults know could expose us to cancer, an innocent 4-year-old child suddenly was diagnosed with stage 4, group 4 cancer, was paralyzed, was never expected to ever walk again, and her life expectancy at the time was perhaps a few weeks to a few months. And I can assure you that as a parent, there is nothing that can prepare you for words such as those. Moreover, the great challenge at that time, which unfortunately persists, is that childhood cancer is the #1 disease killer of children. And so while we have seen great advances in cancer research, particularly in the adult space, and we can expand a little bit about that because it's a wonderful model to follow, in the pediatric space, we learned that, for example, Bella's case, there has not been an improvement in survivability of rhabdomyosarcoma, which is the type of tumor that she had, in over 30 years. The protocol for treatment that Bella received was approved by the Food and Drug Administration around the time of the Second World War. And so while there have been advancements in the adult space, not so much in pediatric cancers. The 2 exceptions of pediatric cancers have been leukemia and lymphoma, but there are 12 major types of childhood cancers. And with the exception of those 2, the majority of the others, of the other 10, there has not been an improvement in survivability in 30 years. In the case of Bella, well, it was an extraordinary battle. And Bella didn't live a few weeks or a few months. Instead, she battled valiantly, and with extraordinary support from our community from all over the world and the best medicine that we could find, Bella lived and battled for 6 years. And she regained the ability to walk, run, and jump. And she passed away when she was 10 years old in my arms, and in the process inspired a movement to live like Bella, which for her meant to serve others, to bring light to the extraordinary scourge of cancer in children, and to assist families that have children undergoing cancer treatment all over the world. Now, in its 8th year, Live Like Bella, which has a team that runs the foundation around the world, operates in 36 countries, assisting families with whatever they may need in terms of co-payment assistance, food, electricity, rent, whatever their ancillary expenses may be. In addition to that, we fund pediatric cancer research, and this year we surpassed making possible $25 million exclusively for research in children's cancers. And lastly, we pay for the headstones, burials, and funerals if a child should unfortunately join Bella in heaven and die of cancer. Live Like Bella helps to assist with those expenses as well. And so while it's a difficult journey, a painful journey, it's one that many parents that are watching this podcast and this event online right now can relate to. And perhaps they feel very lonely. Perhaps they feel in a very dark place. And so the ability to come together with Goodera today and bring light to childhood cancer and greater awareness is something that is fitting of World Cancer Day and something that we're very grateful for.
I think this was the very moment when I am actually celebrating the World Cancer Day with you, sir, because I think the strength that you currently have is unimaginable. The power that you currently have to speak about your experience, about I'm unable to find the right words, sir, here, because it is quite unimaginable what extent of strength you have at this point of time, and all my best wishes to you. And I'm pretty much sure, like I'm 100% sure that Bella must be having a good time up there and she must be resting in peace there. And I have lost all my questions honestly right now, and I would just like to speak my brains out, okay? And I would not like to follow that protocol that we generally had, but I think that would not do the justice to this conversation, Raymond. So here, since you have started this topic, I would also, just for the awareness purpose, for others to also be aware about these kind of things, because like you said, 7 children each day, I guess that's what you said, right, are killed by the cancer disease. And a lot of people must be going through that, and 42 children each day are getting diagnosed with that. So I just wanted to understand from you that what do you think at this point of time, what could have been done right for Bella, or for be it for any other person during those years? Is it the early detection? Is it the better research and better medications for pediatric cancer? Is it something that parents and family and people surrounding that kid can do? What exactly do you think can be done right for all those parents who are going through this?
Well, foremost, I would say to any parent that currently has a child diagnosed with cancer that's watching us live today, I would say foremost, keep the faith. Help is coming. And while unfortunately it has been slow coming, I can tell you that looking behind the curtain and working in this space with Live Like Bella and many other organizations around the world, I am extremely encouraged as to what's coming forward in the coming months, not years from now, but very soon. And one of the things that's critically important when you're undergoing cancer treatment, either as an adult or a child, is that right around the corner, there may be a new treatment option. And I mean literally right around the corner. And so the goal is to be here and to fight to live another day. And so to answer your question, what could have been different and why is the circumstance so dire in the area of pediatric cancer? Well, to summarize it, I will say this. So awareness leads to funding, funding leads to research, research will lead to a cure, right? In that particular order. And in between that, what I would say is that before we get to the point where we can celebrate that childhood cancer has been eradicated from Earth, there is another area that I very much am in favor for and moving toward, and that is making childhood cancer a chronic treatable disease. Like we have seen, for example, in HIV and in other illnesses, we have been able to keep people alive for a very long period of time with a good quality of life. And while I would love to say, Bella, you have been cured of this incurable cancer that was going to take your life, I would be just as happy to have Bella here sitting beside me now where she could be receiving a chronic treatment and be with us today. And so there are milestones along the way that we can reach, and milestones along the way that advances are being made. But foremost, I'll share with you something that is rather difficult to talk about, but is at the root, in my opinion, of the issue as to why this has been so delayed. And so I will say to you that when my wife, Shauna, and I received Bella's certificate of death, in a very odd way, my wife and I high-fived each other. And the reason why we did in a celebratory fashion was because Bella's cause of death was listed as rhabdomyosarcoma. Why is that important? Because Bella was counted. Her life was counted, but so was her death. Ultimately, when we talk about childhood cancer, what is the worst possible outcome of childhood cancer? Death by childhood cancer. And unfortunately, what we see in the United States and in many parts of the world is that, yes, a child may be diagnosed with cancer, may receive cancer treatment, but unfortunately, when they pass away from the disease, their cause of death on their death certificate is listed as sepsis, infection, heart failure, kidney failure, and a variety of other ailments that the child may have acutely died from. But what caused that heart failure? What caused that kidney failure? It was cancer. And here's the significance of that if people that are collecting data to be able to allocate resources, funds, research, etc., if they are not receiving proper data on how many children are dying of cancer, then their data is incorrect in terms of being able to allocate funding and research and resources to that problem. Just like any issue that we may face in life, you cannot begin to solve a problem unless you understand the size and scope of the problem. And you cannot allocate resources unless you know how large the problem is. This is also very true. So in terms of the overall landscape of childhood cancer, data collection is a challenge. And that's something in terms of Live Like Bella, we're working along legislatively with a lot of different people to change. Secondly, it comes to advancing drug development and treatments. And so, although childhood cancer is the #1 disease killer of children, it is a small population of human beings that have childhood cancer. And so, and I know this very acutely because I was an executive in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years. And so when you're developing a new drug that's going to solve a disease or be a treatment for a disease and you're entering it into the market, the more human beings that are affected by that ailment, the more opportunities you have to develop and distribute and actually have human beings take it. A good example of that would be diabetes, or cardiovascular disease, or even adult breast cancer, for example. But when you're talking about a small population of patients, which is often called an orphan drug designation or an orphan category, you have challenges. You have challenges in the selection of patients that you're going to put forward in clinical trials. I'll give you an example. So if you are doing a drug development with a new drug, you do not want to include patients, or you would be dissuaded from including patients in those studies that are stage 4, very ill patients. Because if they die during the study, whether because the treatment that you're testing is ineffective or simply because their disease was so far advanced, it will negatively impact the statistical outcomes of the study. And therefore, it will hinder the advancement of that treatment. And so, for example, a child like Bella, who at diagnosis of 4 years old, was suddenly diagnosed with 9 tumors throughout her body, stage 4, she was not an ideal candidate into entry into any clinical trial anywhere in the world because her statistical chances of dying were so high at the point of diagnosis. This is not uncommon. And what we've learned today is that in children in particular, by the time they're diagnosed with cancer, more than 80% of them are stage 3 or stage 4. And let's think about this for a moment. Here is a good example that we see in the United States, and it's no one's fault, but awareness and programs such as these are critical. So Johnny has leg pain for 8 months, and his mother and father take him to the pediatrician. And the pediatrician runs the standard gamut of blood analysis, urine analysis, and all of the normal things that a pediatrician should do. They all come back absolutely normal. And the pediatrician would not be wrong in saying, well, more than likely this is due to growing pains. But why don't you come back in 90 days just to make sure everything's okay? In the meantime, children have a physiological disadvantage to adults. They're growing. Their cells are rapidly dividing. And so when you add a cancer to an organization that is rapidly dividing, we know that it is far more aggressive than it would be in your case or in mine. We've stopped growing already. But in children, no. And so another example would be Susie has headaches. And again, they go to the pediatrician and they say, well, maybe your eyes are bothering you. Go see the eye doctor. Maybe you need reading glasses. Perhaps you're having migraine headaches. In the meantime, there is a roaring glioblastoma growing in that child's brain. And by the time they screen the child for cancer, we know that they now present, again, over 80% of the time, stage 3 or stage 4. Now that patient is not the ideal patient to enter into a clinical trial. And so early detection of childhood cancers is very difficult in compared to adults. Although you and I are men, if we had a pain that we knew wasn't just right, we wouldn't wait too long to go to the doctor. Children don't do that. A child doesn't tell you, I think I might have a tumor in my leg, or I think I may have a tumor in my brain. And so early detection becomes difficult. And not only early detection in terms of treating them, but early detection in terms of enrollment into them being a candidate for a new medication or a new trial makes it extraordinarily difficult. And so that has also been a hindrance. And lastly, there is an economic piece here. There is an economic piece that has to be addressed and discussed. And that is simply this. When you develop a new drug for treatment of cancer or any type of disease, pharmaceutical companies and the industry have to invest on average about $1 billion in research and development to bring that drug to market. Well, if you have millions of patients that are affected by that, then you can amortize the cost of that drug over the time of the patent life that they have on that drug. But when you have a very small population of patients, then what's called the price per dose becomes very high because you have less people to amortize or mortgage the cost of that development. And so therefore, childhood cancer drug development becomes that much more difficult. And sadly, without awareness, without proper statistics, and without the proper commercial opportunity, innovation is greatly hindered there. And that's why awareness like this is so critically important.
Wow, I honestly did not want to stop you at any point, and I wish you keep talking because those were actually some very, very relevant insights I actually could not even find on internet, even after a thorough research. Since you have a medical background, that you were in biotechnology space and you were working with a pharmaceutical company, I think you have immense knowledge, and due to your such an experience, I think you grew to be even more educated and aware about this particular disease. But so far we have been mostly talking about what are the hindrances and what are the challenges, what are the difficulties. I'd like to take a step ahead and talk about the solutions as well. Like what can be, like to start with at least, what can be the solution? Like you already mapped it very, very perfectly, I guess, because like you said, first of all, it comes awareness. After awareness, it comes funding research, and research medication, right? But we have this chain. Everyone is aware about this chain because this chain is not particular to cancer. This chain applies on every single chronic disease or every single disease that is challenging the humanity and the world. Okay, so what is actually hindering this entire chain, and how can we overcome that hindrances?
Like everything, right? We eat the elephant one bite at a time. Right? The first has to do with awareness, as you very appropriately said, and I think that is increasing day by day. The fact that children are dying of cancer, that are diagnosed with cancer, shocks a lot of people in this day and age, because the only exposure they may have seen have been some commercials on television, and they may believe that may never happen to me. We now know that in the United States, 1 of every 285 children will be diagnosed with cancer, meaning you have a greater chance of having a child with cancer in your family than you do of winning the lottery, sadly. And so number one is that particular awareness. And that awareness is not just for society, but in a great way for pediatricians themselves. You know, general pediatricians are really the front line of seeing children in the community. If we go back to some of the examples we talked about, when a child presents with a pain that is of an unknown origin, or a headache that is of unknown origin, that pediatricians may sooner, instead of later downstream, begin to suspect this child may have cancer.
then that child may be diagnosed faster, and that child may be a better candidate for inclusion into clinical trials versus waiting until they're severely ill and no longer a good candidate. That's another part of the awareness. The other part of the awareness does have to do with the government and the industry. So with the government, one of the ways that we've talked about is ensuring that medical examiners, for example, add, and I'd like to see this in the next few years, on death certificates, that they add a single checkbox of whether the person had childhood cancer. Why? Because in a simple way, if a child with cancer is on their way to the hospital to receive treatment, and God forbid they die in a car accident, the cause of death would be listed as car accident, and the fact that that patient had childhood cancer never becomes a statistical, which is a very important consideration. So that's another aspect. But then also awareness in terms of the industry, in terms of the innovation that can happen, in terms of public-private partnerships, which we are very much involved with as a nonprofit organization, bringing together both the government and bringing together both industry. And I can give some examples of that have been extremely encouraging. But also looking at it from a different perspective. So we talked about how childhood cancer and the word cure, unfortunately right now, seem very far away from each other. But a chronic treatment is something that potentially could be further in reach. A good example of that is what we've seen in HIV in children. And so today we can keep children alive. They may be HIV positive by virtue of whatever circumstance they contracted the virus, but they will not develop AIDS and die of AIDS. In the similar fashion, why is that important? Well, because unfortunately, pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies need to continue their life cycle management and their development of new treatments. And so if we can find a way to keep children alive, one of the very difficult things, but it's very real, to consider is that when an adult dies of cancer, the average loss in years is roughly 20. When a child dies of cancer, the average loss in years is above 76. So if we find a way to treat the children while they're young and keep them alive, they will be a chronic user of medication, of that innovation, for almost 70 years. And so while it may not make sense to develop a drug to cure childhood cancer, and I'm talking strictly economically, because certainly it makes sense to you and I as humans, and certainly as Bella's daddy, that's how I feel. However, if we can keep them alive taking medication chronically, like we see in HIV for all of those years, then that does make sense for the industry to make that investment and develop that treatment. And certainly from a standpoint of life for these children, they can live and they can live comfortably. And so Live Like Bella has really been at the forefront, in my opinion, on many of those aspects in partnering with pharma, partnering with biotech and government to bring all of these synergistic things together. And I'm very encouraged by some of the things that we're seeing.
Raymond, I'd love to understand more about how you're working with other organizations as well. Like you said that you are in partners with a lot of non-profit organizations as well as private organizations as well. So I would love to understand the synergy that you're having and how your synergy is creating an impact. And so far, what impact actually Live Like Bella has created so far? What change has it already brought in the society about whatever we are talking about, the entire path that we're talking about? Yeah.
So in terms of statistical awareness, if you would, looking at the death certificate issue, we have been able to meet both administrations in the White House, both the last two administrations, to bring this issue up, and it's certainly understood. One of the challenges with medical examiners is that they are all in the United States. They are governed by state law, and so it's not something from Washington federally that can be mandated, if you would. This has to go state by state, and so we're working in union with them and with many states so that the medical examiners meet every few years. And simply what we are advocating for is that a simple checkbox can be put on a death certificate to identify whether that patient had pediatric cancer. I think that's going to go a long way to demonstrate the true situation that's happening and how many children are dying of cancer. That's one, and that's working with the government. I can give you certain examples globally of very large pharma organizations that we've been working with that are doing innovation in childhood cancer, and very few people know about it, which is extremely encouraging. But I'll give you a specific example in the state of Florida. And so in the state of Florida, where Live Like Bella is located in Miami, but the state of Florida, the legislature and the governor have been extremely innovative and forward thinking in terms of childhood cancer. 5 years ago, there was something called the Live Like Bella Research Initiative formed. This is a fund exclusively of approximately $5 million, whereby the revenue and the money that comes into that fund comes largely from the cigarette taxes of the cigarettes sold throughout the state of Florida. So what a better way to take something that's not so good for you and do something good for it, and that's to help children with cancer. Prior to this, the Cancer Research Fund in Florida was a general fund of about $119 million, but it was general. So what happened? Similar to what we see around the world and in the rest of the United States, of that money, it was going about 96% to adult cancer research. So very little was going to pediatrics. Because of the Live Like Bella Research Initiative, now there is a designated amount in perpetuity that can only be used for childhood cancer research. And that has had an extraordinary impact that we could not have even imagined. Today, and in fact yesterday, we received notice of the next 10 clinical trials, because every year it's funded, that are going to begin in Florida, which totals now in 5 years, 45 research studies happening in Florida because of these funds. And so what has happened is that it's caused these researchers that before were eating the scraps from the falling off the table to have a fund that exists exclusively here, number one. Number two, it has enthused them to expand their laboratories and their research teams and say, listen, we have funding here and funding will be available every year. Let us run with our ideas. Let us also recruit brilliant minds of childhood cancer researchers from other states in the United States and other parts of the world. Because while in other parts of the world and in other parts of the United States, they may not have this program, but if your passion is pediatric cancer, then why not come to Florida and accept a position at a Florida institution and have access to these funds that are available only here so that you can do something that very few people have the opportunity to do. That has had a remarkable impact on bringing talent, extraordinary minds to the state of Florida, which is something that has been great. But what has been the impact of that on children? Well, last year, Live Like Bella did something that we had never done before. And in 8 years of our existence, since Bella left us and went to heaven, we did the first Live Like Bella Pediatric Cancer Research Symposium in partnership with the government of the state of Florida and many other commercial partners. And we brought together all of the researchers that have received funding from Live Like Bella over the course of $20 million in 8 years to one place at one time, even in the middle of a pandemic, because this was that important. All of them came. All of them were extraordinarily enthused. And I can tell you that what I learned there that day was extraordinary. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about clinical trials happening right now in Florida that are getting ready to move into children in months. I'll give you an example. One of the universities is recognized and discovered that the canine boxer, the dog, develops a type of brain tumor that is almost identical in its physiology and anatomy to what children develop. And very similar, a dog and a child, since the dog cannot speak, by the time the owner of that dog recognizes there's something wrong with my pet, with my dog, the dog is now stage 3 or stage 4, similar to a child and what we see with the early pediatricians. So now they have been treating these dogs with innovative treatments, even so much so using something as lethal as the Zika virus at the University of Florida to penetrate the cell wall and to penetrate these lethal tumors in children. And what they're seeing in these animals that have a similar type of tumor is survivability. And so now we move from the veterinary college to advancing this to be able to be infused in children in months, not years from now. And that's why I started off by saying, if you are a parent and you're watching us right now, keep the faith, because help is coming. There are people working day and night to try to help children battling cancer. And for me, as Bella's daddy, as the chairman of Live Like Bella, it's an honored privilege to just play a small part of that.
I think I can honestly hear you for so long time. And I think those were all my questions. Also, lastly, there is one question that I would like to ask. Like, I haven't followed the book that was given to me, honestly, and I have gone by my intuition that called me up. And one last question I'd like to understand about is, like, whichever nonprofit we have connected with and discussed with, for whatever cause, one thing they all unanimously said, that when it comes to the biggest stakeholder of their organization, they are undisputedly the volunteers. So I would like to understand from you as well, how have you been interacting with your volunteers? And for someone, let's say like me, who feels for the cause of your organization, who wants to come up from, like I'm currently sitting in India, and someone like me wants to come up and support your organization, be it in monetary terms or contributing in terms of time and effort. What are the possible ways that I can come up and volunteer for Live Like Bella's cause?
Well, number one, the lifeline of any nonprofit organization is the goodwill of volunteers, and we are extraordinarily grateful for them. In fact, Live Like Bella operates largely all over the world by volunteers. And so there's many ways to get involved, and if you visit livelikebella.org, you can learn more about the different events and initiatives that are ongoing. One of them that immediately comes to mind is that in March, we do something called the Live Like Bella Superhero 5K. It's a run walk. We have it physically here in Miami at the zoo. However, it's also a virtual event. And so what we do is we encourage people wherever they may be in the world to, one, dress up as a superhero, get your cape. And the reason why we do it in that theme is because we believe that the true superheroes are children battling cancer. And secondly, get a team ready, get them ready of your friends, your family, other volunteers, wherever you may be. Have them dress up as superheroes, and you can do your own exercise, your own 5K in your park, in your neighborhood, in India, wherever you may be. And we have seen global teams do this. And you will receive as a participant, although virtual, a medal from the race. You'll receive information about the children that were there. And it is extraordinarily important, not just because you're raising funds, not just because you're participating in a global virtual walk, but because you are bringing a level of hope that you cannot imagine to a family that thinks no one cares. I can assure you that when your child is diagnosed with cancer and you are told that they have an incurable disease, and you are told that the treatments for that disease are more than 30 years old and that survivability is grim, you find yourself in a very dark place and you believe no one cares about me. And yet, they can look online and they can see that you in India started a team with a bunch of people dressed in foolishness of superheroes, but you're doing it in their honor. You're doing it to benefit them. And all of a sudden, a patient that finds himself and a family that finds himself in a very dark place sees the light of humanity and sees that someone cares. And that is what it means to live like Bella. That's how you can get involved.
Wow, I think I am truly moved. I am definitely going to sign up for that marathon. And I haven't even asked my team yet, but I would like here to propose a proposal. I will definitely put this up in front of my leadership team, Goodera's leadership team, and we would like to associate and collaborate for this this marathon in March. Okay, and whatever we can do, obviously we have corporate teams working with us, and yes, I'm not committing anything right away because I hope you understand that I haven't yet discussed this with my team, and I will definitely do. And because I feel for your cause, and I feel that I can convince at least a few people for this cause. I am so convinced from your cause as well. So that is why I have said it right away to you as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said anything in the first place. So I would like to discuss this with my team. And if you're okay, can we have this collaboration?
Oh, absolutely. We would be incredibly honored. I'll make sure that Monica sends you all of the information and some videos. We do have a participant that runs through the marathon in Miami physically with a GoPro on their head so that you can see the animals and the children. And, you know, it's very moving to see children in their own wheelchairs dressed as a superhero going through this. And because of the time change, you will finish your marathon before we even begin. And so they begin the day saying, my God, look at these people in India. I am incredibly moved with what you just said. And I think, would this be the first team in India? You would be the first team in India. So this, I mean, we've had them throughout Europe, but this would be amazing And this just touches me immensely, Pat. Thank you so much.
I think we have our partners across the globe, I guess, and definitely we can look at how we can create a change, and we can definitely advertise this in our network and promote this so that more and more people get to know about this. And definitely, like, again I'm again and again saying that I'm not committing this, because I'll have to come up with a very formal kind of structure that we can look to have in place. Okay, and for that I'll have to go through my team, my legal, my financials, and the leadership team basically. And hence we would like to take some time, but definitely this will be a great addition to our functions as well. And being associated with Live Like Bella, it is just a privilege for our organization, truly. And thank you so much for sharing all those things. And before we end this conversation, I think you had you said something before we started recording, right, Raymond? And I would like you wanted to speak that on the camera itself. So I would like you to take this time and say what message did you had for all of us.
Well, I'm extraordinarily grateful to Goodera for bringing awareness of not just World Cancer Day, critically important, but specifically pediatric cancer. Pediatric cancer, unfortunately, remains the #1 disease killer of children around the world. In terms of funding for childhood cancer research and advancement, it lags significantly behind adult cancers, where unfortunately only less than 4% of research funding from the National Cancer Institute is allocated to pediatric cancer in comparison to adults. And so while World Cancer Day could be viewed as a day of extraordinary challenge, which it is, for us, it's a day of extraordinary gratitude to all of you for bringing awareness specifically to pediatric cancers, because today is a day that we take another step forward to eradicating childhood cancer from the earth. And we're very grateful for all of you for that.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And I think those were all my questions. I was sitting like an awestruck kid sitting in a classroom of his favorite subject. And I was just listening to you, and it was a very, I would say, in terms of knowledge also, but in terms of emotionally also, I just got enriched. And like, honestly, I don't have exact words to express the satisfaction and that the joy that I really felt throughout our conversation. I think that cannot be explained, and that is something that comes with volunteering as well, that once you volunteer for a cause, the joy is inexplicable, and you cannot explain someone who has not volunteered ever that how good is volunteering. So I think that's the same feeling.
There's another impact that this could have, which I'm very excited about, that few people know. Research is not, and innovation in medicine is not limited to the United States or to a particular part of the world. We're working with people all over the world, and the reason why is because there are a lot of organizations, and I'll say a lot of generic drug manufacturers, that have an immense amount of funds and incredible capability in India and in other parts, that may see this and say, you know what, we have the firepower, we have the innovation, we have the right people, we can do this. We've never done it before, but let's explore what we can do to help children with cancer. There's a lot of outfits in India that can make a lot of good in the research space in this regard. We don't know who's going to see this program, but if it inspires anyone, whether it's a parent, a child, an executive, or a government official, to take action, then today we can celebrate World Cancer Day. So thank you.